Good evening, and I want to thank both of you very much for coming in. We are going to be conducting our endorsement interview for Las Vegas City Council Ward number 4. I know running for office is a tough thing, so we greatly appreciate you guys coming in. First, I'm going to start off by just giving you some basic ground rules about how this process works. Each one of us panel members will give you a 30-second introduction so you understand who's asking you the questions. Then the candidates, each of you will be given 2 minutes to introduce yourselves and why you are asking for our endorsement. Just keep in mind it's not a debate, so neither one of you can ask each other questions. The panel members are the only ones that are allowed to ask questions, and your answers need to be directed back directly to the panel. I won't be rude and stop you mid-sentence, but if we get too much past the 2-minute response time, then I will have to cut you off. At the end of the question and answer period, each one of you will get 2 minutes to give a final statement, in which you will just whatever else you wanted to say that you couldn't get out. And then also please leave your point of contact for the viewers and listeners and hopefully future voters. Okay. So with that being said, I'll start off introducing myself. My name is Jim Jonas. I'm Director of Veterans and Politics, and I also co-host our podcast with Steve Sanson, President of Veterans and Politics.
My name is Talicia. All right, there we go. My name is Talicia Sandoval. I am currently a student at UNLV getting my bachelor's degree in political science and off to law school after that, and hopefully run for Assemblywoman someday.
Hi, my name is Michael Broadway. I am a real estate broker specializing in commercial and vacant land, and I've been licensed, I think, going on 20 years.
Would you like to start?
Sorry. No, I was just circling something. So let's go ahead and start with the introductions. Robert, if you'd like to go first, 2 minutes to introduce yourself and why you're asking for our endorsement.
Great. First of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. My name is Robert Plummer, running for Las Vegas City Council Ward 4. 47-year resident of Las Vegas. I was raised here, graduated from Valley High School. In 1991, I joined the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, where I rose to the rank of captain. After 28 years, I was selected to be the chief of police in Napa, California. Did 2.5 years there, realized that California was not the place I wanted to be, and I didn't want to see California become Las Vegas, so I came back home. Kids are here, 5 grandkids, 4 of them live here and are attending school. Married to my wife for 18 years, living in northwest part of Ward 4. And really one of the reasons why I'm running is because, one of the reasons I'm running and why I would like your endorsement is during my time in Napa and as my time here with Las Vegas Metro, I saw a lot of the challenges that, law enforcement face and are homeless. And part of my time in Napa, we had a huge homeless problem, as you're quite aware of in the Bay Area. You saw the news post about that. And so I wanted to get involved. Sit on the sidelines is no longer part of who I am. I'm a problem solver. My kids are going to grow up here. My grandkids are going to grow up here. I want to make sure that they have a good community like I grew up in. So why I'm seeking your endorsement is because I think that by getting the endorsement of veterans, my father was a veteran, World War II veteran, I think it would be beneficial to let the veterans and those that have served, let them know that what I stand for, what I'm about, and that I'm here to protect and serve what it means to be a resident of Las Vegas and make sure that we have good parks, public safety, good schools, quality education, and economic growth for the city of Las Vegas. So,
okay, thank you. Brenda.
Thank you. Veterans in Politics has a reputation that I respect and appreciate. So this opportunity to sit before you and ask for your endorsement is an honor for me. I've known you guys for quite some time, so I appreciate it very much. My name is Brenda Flank, and I'm running for City Council Ward 4. I'm a native Las Vegan, so I go way back with the issues in our city. Good times, bad times, slow times. I've been involved in politics for quite some time now, started back in the late 70s. I've seen our city grow and change. Of course, things happen in life that put you on a track where perhaps politics is not your issue. Well, like I said, things have changed. I've decided to run for office because we recognize some of the changes in our city, and it's a matter of who's going to be there to represent your best interests. Over the years, I have supported candidates, knocked on doors, made phone calls for candidates, and sadly, a lot of the time, it was a big disappointment. So when this opportunity came up to run for City Council Ward 4, I decided, if not me, then who? Who do I want to represent my community? One of my major issues is, of course, with most candidates looking at this climate, is crime. What can we do about it? I think that's an issue that is complex, and it's not necessarily what we can do about crime. There are a lot of other elements that needs to be discussed. Of course, as a city council representative, there are other things that we have to be concerned about as well. So that is why I'm running. I'm running to represent a city, a community that I love, that I was born in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Since you brought it up, Brenda, I'll let you answer this question first then. So can you explain what your policy on the city council, how you would vote as far as dispersing funds to Metro? Because the Las Vegas City Council is responsible for 40% of Metro's budget. Do you think we have this new movement about decriminalizing everything and doing away with police? What's your stance on how Metro should be funded?
Metro should be fully funded. There shouldn't be any question with regards to our responsibility as city council representatives. Public health and safety is number one. So Metro should get funded with the resources, not just in dollars, but the resources and the support in our community to make sure that Metro has a presence. When we talk about crime, Metro doesn't stop crime. Sometimes they do, but mostly they don't. But we need that presence in our community as a deterrent. So if they are not funded, we don't have enough police officers on the streets, or we don't have enough resources for them to do their job. And that's number one. That's my top priority, is public health and safety. And that also goes, of course, for our fire department. It's important that they are also funded. I live in a senior community. These are issues that really concerns us. And in my community, that's all they talk about. Anytime I have a meeting, coffee meeting, whatever, it is about crime. So that is my priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, James. So 30 years in law enforcement, I understand the challenges and nuances with law enforcement. To your point about the defunding the police, that's an absolute no-starter with me because, again, my career has been law enforcement, and realizing that the amount of resources that Metro has as far as personnel, man hours, is really what's important. The black and white driving in the neighborhood, showing their presence is exactly what the citizens are expecting. Making sure Metro Metro was fully funded. Metro does, in fact, solve crimes. These officers that are out there patrolling in the streets, if they're doing the proactive police work, meaning that the support from the community, proactively policing, they are getting the guns off the street, they're getting the drugs off the streets, they are finding the bad guys, and that's part of what they're authorized to do. But that negative defunding the police momentum kind of made officers kind of take a second stance and sit back and think about, do I want to do this job? So as a city council person, it's my job to advocate for law enforcement, advocate for a safe community. But along with that, we also need to make sure we have other resources to help law enforcement, right? When we talk about the homeless issues, mental health issues, for so long, Metro or other police agencies have always been the first responders to go and handle every scenario. During my time in Napa, I saw the same thing. We were funded for over 80 officers. We only had 60. And so it doesn't matter where you're at across the country, law enforcement needs men and women to get behind black and whites and drive the streets. One of the things that, the city council can really advocate for is when they got the funding several years back for the more cops, a lot of those officers were deployed down to the Strip, which is a major source of income for the state, right? Well, if those officers go to the Strip, then what happens to the neighborhood communities, right? So we need to make sure that the area commands outside the Strip are also fully funded, so the officers, so the residents that live in those communities, like myself and the officers and yourselves, have officers driving around there. So funding our officers, funding Metro fully, and then also utilizing other resources, our marshals for the parks, because that's a better resource than having Metro in those areas. Traffic enforcement, really partnering and doing more with just trying to say it's only Metro's problem, trying to figure out ideas and programs to fix those problems. Yeah.
I would like to quickly cut in for you, just for you to further expand on why you think that Metro doesn't do their job.
I didn't say they didn't do their job. I said, how often is it that crime happens and Metro is not there? So somebody breaks into your house, Metro is not there. They come after the fact. So Metro does an awesome job. And I'm grateful for all the police officers that are willing to step up and be a police officer. I can't imagine it is a difficult job, especially in this climate. I said that because we can't put all of the responsibility on Metro. We as people also need to do things to help ourselves, to protect ourselves in our community. So it's a joint effort is what we need. Neighborhood Watch. It is so important for Neighborhood Watch to have active members in the community to keep an eye on their neighbors. So important. So yeah, Metro does an awesome job, and they can't be there all the time.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a question for both of you. What is your stance on the Second Amendment, concealed carry, and is legal carry, open carry, as is legal in Nevada? Brenda, let's start with you, please.
Okay. I'm, of course, a defender and protector of our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. So, therefore, the Second Amendment is important. Without that Second Amendment to protect the others, where would our country be? That's why it's there. I have no problem with concealed carry. I have no problem with open carry. I personally wouldn't open carry, but that's my choice. Concealed carry, I do. I'm a defender.
Thank you, Michael. Big supporter of the Second Amendment, defend the Constitution, swore that oath 30 years ago when I became a police officer. Teach gun safety to my family. All my family members have weapons because you can't, to Brenda's point, cops can't be everywhere. We have to be able to protect ourselves, but you have to be responsible gun owners. You have to understand what it means to take another person's life, and be willing to pull the trigger. So understanding those responsibilities, and I think as a 30-year law enforcement officer, that was one of my major focuses to my kids and to my wife, to make sure they understood the responsibilities. CCW, big support of CCW. I think oftentimes we've seen instances across the country that those that have CCWs have saved lives. It's a proven fact. It can't be debated. And open carry, during my time with Metro, we would often get calls of someone walking down the street with a gun on their hip or in a Walmart or something like that. And 99.9% of the times, it was a legit citizen just exercising their rights to do that. The very few times it was someone that shouldn't have had a gun and they were experiencing some kind of mental distress or something like that. But open carry, CCW, and the Second Amendment are all things I support. And I think that's what gives us the freedoms in this country to make sure that what's occurring in other parts of the world don't happen here, because we do have a armed citizenry.
Okay. I just have one more question pertaining to law enforcement. I'm going to ask this directly to you, Robert, because you're a police officer, or we're a police officer. So here's when I talked about defunding, I actually made a mistake. What I'm talking more about is not necessarily, there is a movement to defund the police, which I don't agree with. But, and thank you both for answering that question. I'm talking more about demilitarizing the police, because that's one thing that I am a strong advocate for, the police as well, and first responders. But I've seen things on TV, and I've seen things in this town where it basically looks like they're not police officers. They are basically rolling down the street in pretty much what are tanks. And they got all this bulletproof. It almost looks like an invasion. So if you walk out of your house down your driveway and you see that deters you from wanting to approach a police officer in the future. So what's your stance on that? What's your overall stance on use of force from a police standpoint?
Well, it's a great question. There's so many facets to that. So let's just talk about the first example where you come out your house and you see a bunch of officers in Bearcats is what they are. They're not tanks. Now I can tell you when I was in Napa, we had MRAPs, and if you know what an MRAP is, that is not a community type vehicle. But the Bearcats, when we send our officers, and specifically when patrol officers go out and do their job, they don't have that equipment. When you call in the SWAT team, specifically, those are the ones that are armed with the Bearcats, the armored, the ballistic vests and stuff like that. And they're in there for a specific purpose. That is to de-escalate and defuse a violent situation. During my time with Metro, I was also part of the force investigation team, where we would look at those incidents and figure out if everything was done the way it was supposed to be. And if not, then implement training to address those things. So far as officers or Metro or any police department having the right equipment to go deal with violent situations, I believe they should be supported by that. They should have that type of information or equipment. To my point earlier about Napa having MRAP, police departments shouldn't have MRAPs. They're not designed for communities. In fact, the one we had in Napa couldn't even roll down the streets because the streets are too narrow, and it was just a very bad situation. One of the things too, that to your point about driving down the street, Metro we could use the reverse 911 system where we call and say, hey, James, there's an issue in your neighborhood. Please stay inside. You're going to see these vehicles coming down, or do it through texting. So I think we can use social media to kind of diffuse the anxiety that residents have when they see that type of force coming through the community. But I do believe that our officers, men and women, who go and do the job for SWAT officers should have all the protection they can, because having been in those situations, understanding, had I not had the right equipment, the right material, it would have been very uneasy going into a place where someone is armed with a long rifle and taking shots at you. So I believe it's important that we have it, but use the right way, train the right way, and there's accountability measures from not only the department, but the community also has the right to ask these questions, just like you did. So thank you.
Brenda, I say you grabbing your. I didn't direct the question to you, but did you want to add something? to that, or can we move on to the next question?
Just briefly, it's important, like I said earlier, that our police officers are equipped, that they have the resources. When you think about the things that happened in 2020, the riots, it was a war zone. So not necessarily here in Vegas, but you see that. And it's important that all law enforcement has those tools to, like he said, de-escalate situations like that. So I'm okay with it. Not on a regular basis, but it's good to have those things available.
Question for both of you. And we've obviously had an escalation in crime. I think we would all agree with that. Starting with you, Brenda, what would you do to stop that, to control that, de-escalate it? And we'll start with you.
Of course, crime is the number one issue all across this country. I think that there are three things that we can take a look at. I did mention the neighborhood watch. It's important that we also be engaged with things that are happening in our community. The second thing I think we need to do is support our police department. It is very difficult to do a job if no one has your back. We can do all the funding, provide all of the resources that we can, but it's important that they know we have their back. One of the things that I talked about some time ago was perhaps some kind of marketing program, a promotion about the importance of our police and the services that they provide, and try and change that vilification that we have seen over the past years. Change that image. We need to show that they are a vital part of our community and they deserve the respect that they earn, and they do every time they go out. The last thing, which is one of the things that we're doing in our community, is additional security services or forces. Right now, we have security in our community. It's a senior community, and they are limited. So we are looking to provide, perhaps depends upon the cost, some private security. Presence of any type of law enforcement or security is a deterrent. In our community, they don't carry guns. They're seniors, they're elderly people. That's not their function. So it's important that we have alternatives to protect our communities.
Thank you. So first and foremost, community engagement is a huge part of fighting and reducing crime. When you look at the broken windows theory, which has been, we've been using it in policing forever, right? And it is true to form. When you have the houses that are abandoned, the newspapers are out there, the signs that you see that there's issues, we as neighbors need to look out for our neighbors and look out for those residents and have those interactions. Another way is to engage the community from not just the First Tuesday, which is something that Metro does, but take that show on the road. Take it to different locations in the Valley, different community events. They do the Safe Streets, the summer big outdoor event, and those types of things. So those types of events are how you can, in fact, reduce crime. But there's an additional thing, and one of that is, to Brenda's point, is supporting our officers, because if our officers are supported, they go out there and they do the traffic stops at 3:00 at night when they see someone riding their bike through a neighborhood. And if you live in a community, a gated community, you see on your cameras where someone's riding through the community, checking your doors. So we have to really encourage our officers to go out there and let them know that when they're doing that, they're supported. The department does a really good job of training our officers. We as community members now need to make sure we support them. And as a city council person, advocating, having those events, appreciation opportunities for officers, but also having appreciation events for communities, right? Going to these gated communities or senior communities and hold events that talk about safety and how to be safe. Scamming, how to prevent being scammed, how to prevent from being the victim of fraud. Those are the crimes that we don't often get reported, but they're often the most prevalent. And then here's the last part of this whole thing is, the police is one component of that. It's our judges, it's our DAs that have to enforce the laws that are on the books. We have rules and laws in place to keep people incarcerated. For whatever reason, there's a very lenient bend in society right now from a judge standpoint that allows these folks to get out. I can't tell you how many times during my time in Napa, my time here, that we would arrest someone and they're out before your officer's doing the paperwork. That is not a deterrent. So the deterrent has to come from the other parts after Metro does their job, or North Las Vegas, or whatever police department, that they're actually held in custody for some period of time to be held accountable. And if they have issues with drugs or whatever, then figure out ways to divert that before they get back on the streets to start causing havoc and chaos in our community. So it's the law enforcement, the community engagement part, and then the justice system in the back end to make sure they're holding people accountable.
So another question for you, Mr. Plummer. I feel that you offer a very unique perspective with a 28-year career with Metro in the homicide division. Mm-hmm. What do you feel about the rise in specifically homicides in the city? Yeah,
that's, when I took over in 2017, the homicide unit, one of my first challenges to the team was, I want you to increase our solvability. We were about 87%. We were able to reach it up to in the mid 90s, and I think they hold about a 96% solvability rate. What we found in doing the victimology of a homicide case is that there's oftentimes a relationship between the suspect and the victim. Very few times, and not that you have the stranger type homicides. And when you do have those, we were very successful in solving those because criminals by nature are sloppy. You can watch all these CSI shows and they think they've outwitted them, but the reality is they are sloppy. But part of that, to address your point, how do we reduce those? Is it's more than just it's societal issues that are out there that are affecting this. There's a lack of respect for humanity. Young people today don't value human life. Drugs and other things have taken kind of hold this lifestyle of being a thug, if you will, or trying to be someone that you're not. And going to a gun is the way of addressing or solving a problem is not the answer. When you talk about, we talked about crime and homicides. A few weeks back, there was a homicide at a hookah lounge where one person was killed and 13 other people were shot. The individual who was arrested did 3 years in prison for a previous murder and was out. And so if he would have been in custody a lot longer, someone else's life may have been saved. We had the shooting over off of Sahara at the Chinese restaurant. Had the suspect who was arrested for murder before been in custody, you wouldn't have these. So currently there are 54 homicide suspects on house arrest right now. So if you really want to address the homicide problem, you have to get the problem people off the streets and into the facilities, the jail. And maybe we need to look at, do we need to have the misdemeanor for property crimes or something like that out on the streets versus having a violent felon in custody? And the chance of reoffending are pretty great. And it was early mid last year, you had the individual that came from California that came here in a matter of 3-4 days, he committed 3 homicides. So we are dealing with California's depopulation of the prison system, which is not doing anything for Las Vegas or Nevada. And so we have to partner better with California, who, by the way, did away with their gang files and all the things that notified Metro, hey, these folks are out here. So there's some things that Metro has tried to do numerous times, but the challenge is our surrounding state, which is California, which is influx of a whole bunch of violent offenders into our city. So being proactive and making sure that those officers that are working are actually being proactive in those neighborhoods where we have the highest probability of homicides.
Okay, thank you. Brenda, did you want to add something to that?
He did bring up some great points, especially about the justice system and what happens to repeat offenders. So you hear about these awful crimes that happen, and it seems like at least 9 times out of 10, the perpetrator has a record. Rap sheet or whatever they call it. There's a record. So we need to be more aware of the things that are happening in our courtrooms and why is it that these people are being released? How is it that they're getting back on the streets to reoffend? That's real important.
So do you think that it would be time for sort of 3 strikes you're out rule when it comes to violent crime for both of you? But we can start with Miss Brenda or Miss Flank, please.
Wow, I haven't heard that phrase in a long time. 3 strikes you're out. It used to be really prevalent, when we talked about things that are happening in our community. There are a lot of cultural issues that drives this rise in crime. Do we still have the 3 strikes you're out is a question that I would ask, but we need to look at sentencing. What kind of minimums do they have for particular crimes? Is it like the low-level crimes? He mentioned something about a guy that was in prison for 3 years for murder. How does that happen? So there's a problem with the judicial system. We are doing our part to try and make our communities safe so that we can live a good life. But it's the system that needs to be looked at and corrected for sure.
All right, thank you. Robert, did you want to add anything to that? Or respond?
I'll just give a real quick. The restorative justice plan that they're implemented, we're realizing now that it's not working. So we have to really identify ways in which to hold people accountable. So the 3 years in jail for murder, unacceptable. You have a prison just outside here in Jean that is vacant. They spend about $14 million a year just to maintain it so it doesn't go defunct and rusty. So we need to figure out from a state level how to get that back open and start to house some folks. But beyond housing, figure out how to get them to reentry into the community. John Ponder, who runs Hope for Prisoners, does a fantastic job with the reentry program for ex-convicts coming out of prison. He's partnered with Metro. He's brought to the forefront that these folks that go away when they come back to their time deserve an opportunity to be productive members of society. I think we need to invest in more of those types of programs, make sure that when our inmates come back into society, that they have the foundation and the support from not only their family, but the community as well. And you see a lot of business communities stepping up and supporting them. So those opportunities are how we can address, but first things first, let's hold folks accountable. We have the laws in the books. Let's use them. And when you vote for judges, make sure you're voting for the judges that will support and stand with what you believe in.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Plummer. The reason why I was kind of chuckling is because I want to get back to city council, because when you bring up judges, that's obviously something that we are very, very involved in with Veterans of Politics. But I want to get back to exactly what's in the purview of the race you're running for. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Brenda on this one. Now, Ward 4 has a very specific master plan, okay? And the people in Ward 4 really like that master plan, much like Boulder City, right? There's a lot of restrictions with the master plan. How do you balance keeping the master plan the way it is, but still encourage other people to invest in your community?
Certainly, with the growth in our city, things like that are subjects like that needs to be discussed. It is a multiplex situation or issue because we are also responsible for business licensing and regulations for businesses in our wards, in our communities. So we have to balance the growth and also take a look at the regulations, the limitations. I think for older communities like Sun City, Summerlin, those types of regulations are set. There's no need to make those adjustments. We need to look at where the population growth has moved, and it's moved quite a bit if you look at our map. And then address those potential issues then when it's time to discuss any changes to that master plan. We have to be proactive for sure. We can't wait until we have another growth spurt in this town to say, oh, perhaps we should have done this or that. So we have to have people on the council that has a vision and has a desire for growth in our city, safety in our city, quality of life, of course, is always a concern. There are a lot of things that are in that pot that needs to be addressed. So vision is what we need.
Thank you, James. And yes, vision is key and it's important. As a city council person, you have to forecast where the city is growing. I currently live in the newer part of Ward 4, where I live now. I was actually Ward 6. So with the redistricting, I was brought into Ward 4. Very familiar with that area. There is a lot of growth going on there. The further west end of the ward, there's houses being built all over the place. And we have to make sure that the growth with the houses also coincide with the right amount of infrastructure and the services that are needed in that area. Good parks, good roadways, things that, you know, when you talk about the more mature areas like Sun City, Summerlin, or Desert Shores, even Painted Desert, those are pretty much set in stone. And there's very limited space that's within the city left to really develop and build, you know, businesses or large multi shopping centers to that. Now, you got a big county island in between, in the middle of us there. So, but in the city specific areas, by making sure that we have the right amount of growth at the right pace, that folks can feel comfortable living in